Hello and welcome back to Dundonald Castle's Medieval Mondays. My name is Blythe and I am the Education Officer at Dundonald Castle for anyone that doesn't already know me. And today we are going to be talking about plate armor or plate mail. So where does it come from? When did they start using it? Well, armor made of sheets of metal like this goes back to Greek and Roman times, and actually both the Greeks and the Romans used plate mail. Like you see here, this is actually a Roman suit of armor. However, the technology was seemingly lost after the fall of the Roman Empire, so about 1,500 years ago, and it didn't become popular again in Europe until around 1300, so about 700 years ago. So first I want to talk about the elephant in the room, and that's this guy. It's called a breastplate. Now, typical mail like this was made of iron or steel, which was heated and hammered out into thin sheets of metal. And these heated sheets could be cut and molded to the correct shape and size so that they would cover different parts of the wearer's body. Like this covers my chest and my stomach, part of my stomach. So it's keeping all my organs in here safe. That's pretty important, right? Helmets are actually considered part of armor or plate mail and would be part of a full suit of armor. See how it's made of really similar material. What does it weigh? Remember, we're going to ask this question about most of the items that we look at. Actually, a whole suit of plate armor would typically weigh about 45 pounds or 20.5 kilos. Or more, up from there. So more than a typical 4-year-old child. Now let's add that to the baby and the 3-year-old that I'm already wearing in my chain mail, because in the 14th century it was really common to wear both. So you add this to your chain mail and your weapons, and wealthy knights would have been carrying a lot of weight. Though they weren't always used together, in fact by the end of the Middle Ages, plate mail was more common on its own than both. As I said, about 700 years ago, there was a period in fashion where both were used together. Now let's go on to who used it. Well, unlike padded armor, so remember, that's like your coif, or your arming cap, it goes on underneath your helmet. Only wealthy men could really afford a full suit of armor. These suits of armor were tailor-made. They often required repairs after you use them. A simple way to judge how expensive a piece of armor is, and I've mentioned this in some of the previous videos, is to see how ornate it is. How many different pieces of metal were used to make it, and is there any decoration? So the kettle helmet that we saw on David in the previous couple of videos, as I mentioned, this is made of just one piece of metal, which just needed to be pounded out and shaped and fastened together, meaning that they use less materials to make this. This guy, however, is made of a bunch of different pieces of metal. So as you can see on the back, there's at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This big one is 7, 8 for the top, and then all of these decorations have to be cut out and all of these little screws have to be made to keep it all together. These rivets have to be made. So this is a much more expensive piece. This is our great helm, and we'll talk about this in a couple of weeks. But if you saw somebody with this, like we've mentioned before, they're probably going to be a wealthier knight because this is much more expensive. Same with the breastplate. If you were poorer, you might be able to afford a padded armor gambeson. You might even be lucky enough to have a halberd, so a shirt of chain mail. But plate mail like this, like I said, this is tailor-made, and we've got several pieces of metal here. So at least 1, 2, 3, 4, and then all the pieces that go around the hips to keep you safe. So really, really expensive. Only really noble knights wore stuff like this. What are the different variations? Well, this is a bit tougher with plate mail because it comes in so many shapes and sizes, unlike padded armor and chain mail. Plate mail had different pieces to cover all the different parts of your body. So remember a few weeks ago, we talked about possibly having a padded armor shirt with bits to tie your armor onto your plate mail. So there's going to be lots of different pieces. So of course we have our breastplate here. Remember helmets, those are also part of a suit of armor. Then of course you have pieces to cover your arms, pieces to cover your legs. So here, of course, we have a piece to cover our hands. I'm sure lots of people will be familiar with what this is. This is a gauntlet, like the one that Thanos had, only in my opinion, much cooler. And this, look at all the pieces of metal this is made of. So this is a very expensive piece of kit, but it's got leather on the inside so that you're still flexible and you can still grip a weapon. Now there are others, another type of gauntlet at the castle that's just a couple of bits of metal, more like a mitten that covers your hand. You have a little bit more freedom with that, probably a little bit less expensive, but not quite as safe. And we've also got at the castle greaves. Now those cover your lower legs. Now the ones we have at the castle are just a solid bit of metal like this that cover your legs. But there's another kind of armor that was used that uses pieces of plate tied in with leather. Now this is a lot more flexible, probably a lot less expensive, a little bit easier to move in. So we have a full set of this actually. This would have covered your legs. And then we have the bit here that goes over your arm. So this protects your elbow, and then this would protect your lower and your upper arms. So lots and lots of different pieces, which is why when you put them all together, they tend to be really heavy. Now remember I said that they used plate mail in the times of the Greeks and the Romans, but after it came back and was popular in Europe, it actually remained popular for a really long time. At least 200 years ago, they were still using it, and you can actually see pictures of, I'll show you in here, of somebody using plate mail in the Napoleonic Wars. That wasn't that long ago. But once people started to use firearms, so guns in warfare, stuff like this became a little bit less common. And that's just because this is really good at protecting you against a sword, but it's not going to stand up to cannon fire or even guns. So they started transitioning into different lighter pieces to wear, pieces that were made mainly of leather, because they knew there wasn't a piece of armor, at least back then, that could protect you from guns, so you needed to be able to move and to be comfortable. The one piece that stuck around for a long time is this, a breastplate, and that helps to protect your really important organs, your chest, your heart, some of your belly. So these stuck around, and this is what's in these pictures from the Napoleonic Wars, and they were used at least into the 18th century. Well, that's all I have for you guys about plate armor or plate mail. I've really just touched the tip of the iceberg here. So as usual, if you're interested in this stuff, I'm going to post some sources in the comments below so that you can read a little bit more about the different pieces, what they were called, what they were used for, different styles of armor, because there's so much to talk about when it comes to plate mail. So thanks everybody for watching. Next week, we are going to be talking about my very favorite helmet. And that is this guy, the pig-faced bassinet. It's my absolute favorite, not just for how it looks, but for its amazing name. So come back next week and we'll talk specifically about this helmet. Thanks so much for joining us, and as always, if you really enjoyed this video and you'd like us to keep making more, please consider going to Dundonald Castle's Facebook page or our website and making a small donation to the education team so we can still keep bringing this to you while we're off-site. Thanks so much.